a bit of context here. Obviously, Alice and myself are finishing up the June sessions that we went through around the 3 S's of business. So we started with solvency, we went through and then looked at survival, and now today it's around sustainable business. So looking today at the business life cycles, and it's absolutely a journey, and hopefully it's going to be one that's really interesting and of great value. So based basically from both of our insights in what probably 50 years together of business, which is a worry. So let me just jump into what I think the challenges are. So I think the challenges when we're in business, in our own business, is that we've just jumped in. But, you know, as we know, challenges can also be opportunities. And, you know, we jumped in for a reason, because we decided, for whatever that reason is, that we wanted to start up our own business. And so some of us jump in with little or not enough planning, and with no real regard for what's ahead. And as I said just now, knowledge is certainly power. And so, you know, the journey is not going to be an easy one. And I guess for me, having been in this journey now for 2 years, with a corporate career that spanned 30 years, even now for me, I've really come up against some surprising challenges and things, and I'm learning along the way that I didn't know about. And I think it's good to be forewarned and actually have some planning. So I think some of this really is an opportunity where we have jumped in, but today I'm going to take you through some checklists and balances and transition plans around where are we in our business. Alice, what do you think about jumping in?
I totally agree with you, Paula. But I think it's important also to realise that there are certain things that you can't plan for until you're actually in there. I think that, you know, being forewarned is definitely being forearmed, and you should try and do as much as you can. But I have also seen people who have almost paralysed themselves by trying to plan too much and waiting for the perfect time that's not there. So I think there is a delicate balance about making yourself aware, getting all the information you can, but sometimes you've got to jump
get on with it. Yeah, it's true. The second challenge, as we probably all know, is that we're here on our own, in our business on our own. We don't have the teams around us that those coming from a corporate career had. For those that have always had their own business and don't know what a corporate career looks like, then you've just managed this a lot faster than perhaps certainly someone like me, who's been really used to having a leadership team and people around us and teams that can go off and do this insights and reviews and things like this. Well, you know, we're here on our own. This is it. We have to be everything and everyone. And that's challenging, right? Because we can't do the transactions and the strategy at the same time. It's really hard to be in the detail and also come out of the detail and have that helicopter view. But also, because we're on our own, we can sometimes miss opportunities because we're so busy doing something 1 week or 1 month that we've lost an opportunity somewhere else that we haven't seen. But also, because we're on our own, that's it. We've got bandwidth of the amount of hours that we can invest. And there's a lot of constraints around resources, our time, our money, you know, our knowledge. We don't know everything. And I think, you know, we can feel overwhelmed. As to Alice's points, we could also then have that feeling stuck, dropping our heads because we don't know whether we're doing the right things. Alice?
No, that's exactly right, Paula. And I think whilst, you know, many people are doing it on their own, that's their sort of in those smaller businesses and when they're starting out as well, I think it's important for people to realise that they're not the first person to have done it on their own either. And whilst nobody might be doing exactly what you're doing at the time that you're doing it, there will be other communities and people that you can link in with, that you can sort of share those experiences and sort of trust, have trusted conversations to make it not feel so overwhelming. Because I do think that a lot of people can take that, and as absolutely they do, to heart. And there can, you know, be some mental health issues that spawn from that. But when you're able to share that with the community, I think sometimes you can sort of notice that the mountain's actually a molehill.
Yeah, and just normalizing challenges. And yeah, we know this in LBD. This is exactly why we come together like we do. But Yeah, having a think about surrounding yourself. And it doesn't matter that you surround yourself with people, actually it's really positive that people on different stages of their journeys, because as we'll look as we go through this presentation today, that it's always evolving. We're always at different stages in our business all the time. So if that doesn't appeal, then think about starting up your own business. Yeah. But what I think one of the biggest challenges that we have is that we come into business because it's our expertise and it's our passion to actually run that business. We don't know necessarily how to run a business. We don't know how to be a CEO. We don't know how to strategize. We know what we know. Okay. So it's really, the challenge is actually, how do I run a business? Because this is hard. But then equally, the barriers to entry are so low that everyone can have a go, which again is good and bad. You know, and I think it's just almost, some of us reach a level of success because we happen to have the right product at the right time and in the right market. And we don't know the reasons behind success because we've had that momentum perhaps from day one. But for some people that are really building that momentum, and it's taken 2 years or 3 years to really get somewhere and get that traction, like, we know how hard it is, but different people find different successes.
Well, look, absolutely. And I think strategy is important at every step. I think, you know, and I know we'll go into this, but Paula, I love how you work through things. It's sort of as a cycle or as a spiral. It's not here we start at A and we go to B and our strategy is then finished. I think while strategy is integral, I don't think anybody can dispute that. You need to have sort of flexibility and agility built into that strategy so that you can understand, well, what happens next? So you might come to the end of the current strategy, but that's not the end game. It's like, okay, now we start again. And I think that's where having those skills around how to build that strategy is so important, because it's not something that's ever actually going to leave. Yeah,
exactly. And as I said, if that doesn't appeal to you, you need to really be aware of that. And I guess, I just having an appreciation of what that might feel like, because you're constantly in the flow, and it's really hard as a business owner to actually get that separation from that being in the flow, because you know, often it starts from a home office, and so that then becomes hard to sort of, you know, create those boundaries. But I think this diagram really starts to bring to life the fact that it's a continuous cycle. So like Mother Nature, you know, business has a life cycle of ideation, creation, launching, assessing and reviewing and growth, and then taking off, and then maturity, and then like a rebirth. Today I was out on a walk, and I was hoping Kate would be on here because I saw this clematis bush, and I just looked at it and thought, wow, there's 4 stages of growth on that bush at the same time. And so this is how we should be thinking about our business, like, you know, like a bush, like a, you know, a nature cycle, because on that bush was buds, new flowers, different coloured flowers where they've obviously gone through a consolidation and a growth process and are taking off into finding their true colours. And then there was flowers that were dying, and then those that were rebirthing. So we see this everywhere, and I just thought that was such a beautiful analogy when I saw it, and I'm like, yeah. So that makes our business life cycle kind of feel like it's not that hard, because Mother Nature's doing it every single day, rain or shine. And that's how we can think about it, because sometimes this is easier than others. You know, we think about our journey, we think about why we started it in the first place. It's so integral to actually surviving, just getting back and being clear about what is the why, you know, and then planning the journey is the how, and starting the journey is the what, you know, and measuring, always coming back and measuring how you've gone. You know, I think one of the key learnings that I've got from going from a corporate career into a business opportunity is that the rewards are different. The rewards are totally different. And that, I think, has been my hardest challenge, because you don't get initially a salary package every month or every fortnight and you go, yep, great, I did that work this month, I feel good about that work, and I've been paid for it. But in business, we know that we do that work, and we work damn hard, and we do good work, and we see no financial reward often for that, and that can be really hard. Alice, what do you think?
Absolutely. No, I totally agree with you. I love this because it sort of again goes to our earlier point about the cycles. You know, it's never ending. It just sort of once it starts, and then it looks like you're coming to the end of a certain part, and that's really just the beginning of another. The only other thing I would point out there is your sort of point about nature is really important, because I think sometimes, you know, we can think things are all a bit hard and how do we sort of get it all and fit it in. Nature actually offers us certain pinpoints as well, that if we actually think about it, we can pin our organisation and our planning to those, which actually can then help us to make sure that every year, you know, every month, we actually can go through those cycles and just take check of our businesses, which is interesting.
Yeah, and we'll definitely unpack this in a bit more detail, because not only is your business got a life cycle, but every product in your business has got a life cycle too. So like that clematis bush, you're going to have the whole business, but in your business, you're going to have 4 or 5 or 3 or 4 products that are at different stages. And so you've got to be able to manage that. Again, a challenge, because you're actually doing everything initially. So I liken business to a journey, a engine, a car. I can see here we've got an airplane, which was awesome timing, talking about the future of flight. But, you know, thinking about dashboards, they can be really complicated, but they can be really simplistic around what are the measures that matter. And I've got here around, you know, there's 3 measures that really matter around how fast are you going? What is your velocity? What is your constraints? What are your revs per minute? How fast have you got the foot to the floor, and different aspects? And then how's your energy going? How is the fuel going that's actually enabling you to keep going? Because again, it's going to be a consistent journey where you've got on ramps, off ramps, you've got weather, you've got things that are out of your control. But you've got to get really clear about the basic measures that matter to you. And they're all different. You know, I think for anyone listening to this, they might say, well, what are the measures that matter to me? Well, I can't tell you that, because they're your measures. But I think the first measure is your why. Why are you doing this in business? You've got to get really clear about that, because when you hit tough times, that's what keeps you going. That's your fuel. If I know I want to switch the light on for 10,000 people to have a strategy and have success, that's my fuel. And then my reward is one by one, I can keep saying I flicked that light on for somebody. And then hopefully momentum will build, and then it'll be like, you know, you'll be at a different stage of your business. But I think second important factor is the financial runway. And what I mean by this is, how long can you survive without taking a wage, or worst case scenario, your revenue takes longer to deliver than you had expected. And that is really important. And again, once you start the setup, this continues. You don't ever have to set and forget and go, oh, I've got enough cash now, because we've talked about this. It's always the measure of how much cash you've got. But then when you go into the next phase of growth, how much cash do I need for that? So again, we'll touch on that a bit more in a minute. But the third point is around knowing where you break even, and what capacity levers you've got. So knowing that you want to work 30 hours a week, or knowing that you're happy to work 60 hours a week, or what are your constraints around resources, which is time, effort, and money. Those are my 3. Alice, what?
I agree with you, Paula. I think the why, it's the north point on the compass, isn't it? When everything gets a bit foggy, that's where you can figure out which way you're going and why you're there.
Yeah.
I often find, for me, it's when I have to make really sort of, you know, interesting decisions, actually then going back, stripping it all back to why. It sort of helps with that. In relation to the measuring, I think the break even, the runway, I've always said, you need to know your figures. If you don't know your figures, you can't plot your story. So unless, you know, you want to be flying blind, you can't be doing that. So to put it, I guess, in your dashboard analogy, you sort of need to have the compass to know where you're going. And then you need to know that you've got enough fuel to get there. Yeah. So I totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's at the top there where I've got the GPS. I mean, the fundamentals are there. And I think, you know, some people drive cars that have got sports mode, and some people drive cars that have got GPS, and others, you know, there's all sorts of flashing bells and lights and whistles, but, you know, fundamentally, what are the measures that matter to you? So thinking about that cycle and the time and the journey, so starting to actually get into the unpacking of what does that mean. And I think, you know, the journey that Alice and I are taking you on is not going to answer all your questions. You'll probably leave this session with more questions than answers, but it just starts your thinking. And that's part of this on-ramp, if you like, that there has to be strategic, critical thinking before we start and at every growth stage thereafter. So if we think about our journey, we think about our business, we think about that overarching, which phase am I in? Am I in that growth? Am I in that creation, the growth, or am I consolidating? Or am I reaching maturity? Do I need a rebirth? Do I need a pirouette, as Alice would say? You know, where am I? But I think it's important to do this for your business as a whole, and then the individual parts of your business. So for me, I've got an umbrella of, you know, 3 things that I do around mentoring individuals, advising businesses, and growing global communities. Each one of those 3 are at different life cycles. And if I actually drill down into each of those 3, 2 of them are at different stages. So if I think about building communities, obviously LBD fits into that, and that's probably at its either consolidation or maturity cycle. It needs a rebirth and a refresh. And then CFO Conversations is my community for finance people, and that's new. That's a creation. So even within those 3 pillars, I've got different products at different stages, you know, and it's a bit like the spinning plates. So you've got to kind of run through the 9 spinning plates to make sure that one doesn't drop. So, you know, you've got to be that magician. Again, having the financial roadmap, but also having the non-financial roadmap, having those focus areas. So my happy place, is probably Alice's as well, is getting into the numbers, but it's not just about the numbers. It's actually about the focus and what do you need to build outside of the numbers.
Oh, look, absolutely. And looking, I like what you talk about, you know, looking at the different products, looking at the different life cycles. I've seen it more than once where everyone thinks, oh, we can't give up this product. This is our best seller. This is our product that we've always hung our hat on. And that's actually the loss leader in the whole. And people don't understand that because they're looking at overall, you know, dollars X is coming in revenue from that product. But how much is it actually costing you to put out there? And until you can actually break up, you know, individual products, services, business elements, and look at them from that sort of helicopter view, I think you can get a little bit lost in what you think your business is doing, where reality might be a little bit different. Yeah,
which is why coming back and reviewing as well is important. But yeah, I think building from the ground up and also then coming down like from the top is a really good place to meet yourself in the middle. So, and it's, you know, going back to your point, Alice, you don't have to get everything perfect before you start, but you will come back to getting things perfect. Like, this is a cycle. So if you skipped the first 6 steps, that's okay. You probably haven't fallen. You're probably still kind of, you know, making things work, but you will come back to those 6 steps that you missed. And I'm the same.
Absolutely. Yep.
I'm the same. I knew what it was going to take. Well, I thought I knew. I didn't actually know. I thought I knew what it was going to take to get my business off the ground. It took at least twice that in terms of money and time. And so I didn't build the detailed financial plan from day one because I didn't know it. I didn't even know my products day one. So I just actually made a start, you know, again, a bit like flying the airplane as I'm building it, which, you know, it's okay. But, you know, there was no point me getting my numbers perfect because I didn't even know what I was selling.
No.
But now I've come back to that. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how you get there. You kind of get to the same place. So these are the checklists. These are the big picture things that if you haven't got, you need to start thinking about. And this is the sort of helicopter view around the major strategies. So thinking about your brand, thinking about your IP. What is it that you're selling? What is it that you do? What is it that you value? Get really clear about that. Get clear about your platform and positioning and what products you're selling. And again, this can kind of be in your first 12 months or maybe even 24 months, because you will finesse it as you go as well. But I think getting that pre-thinking is important as being in it as well. I didn't have my website up and running for the first 12 months of my PK advisory business, but that was okay because I was getting leads from my network. But, someone running an e-commerce business, clearly you need a website day one. So it just depends on where you're at. Looking then at sales and nurturing and building your journeys. And what I mean by that is your buyer's journey, your client journey, looking at conversion rates, looking at awareness, what's the funnel, and then customer experience. And then, maybe boringly, but importantly, looking at reporting and process and structure, which I would say actually is really important to be there day one. So I didn't have a website day one, but I had Xero, I had reporting, I had an ABN, I had the structure day one. Alice, what do you think there?
Oh, Steve, I totally agree with you. That's clearly the accountant in you, but it's also the best way to do it. I think having the right structure too. I think, Xero is phenomenal, but having it set up correctly is also, imperative. I agree. I think people sometimes can think it's a waste of time looking at a lot of sort of structure and planning, and that they should instead be in the trenches making the money. But without a major plan, key milestones and points, you don't know whether you're succeeding or whether you're spinning your wheels. You could be doing it all for absolutely nothing. So I think making sure that you, and as you said, some things can wait. There are some things, that you can prioritize in this forum. But it's important. And if you don't know, what your brand is, then you'll confuse your customer. If you don't know, what processes you're wanting to go through, then how do you know, what experience your customer is having? So I think it's, whilst yes, absolutely, getting the dollar in the door is important, you need to know what you spent to get that dollar in the door and how you're going to spend that dollar once it comes in. So I totally agree.
Getting back to your compass, your North Star, your reason for doing this is fundamental, because if your reason for doing this is to make a 7-figure net profit business, then that's totally fine. But if your reason for doing this is to help impact communities that didn't have the opportunity to have this business growth or whatever that looks like, that's a very different set of objectives and outcomes to making a 7-figure profit. The two might correlate, but I think it's getting really clear about why you're doing this business.
I think that gives you the opportunity then to choose the path that you're going to go on, because if you're reading lots of books or doing courses and which I think education is key in business, that's the whole there's a whole different story about that, but you need to have all the information. But you will be told to do things a certain way, but that might be because the person who wrote the book thinks that your motivation is to build the 7-figure business, where really it is to help a certain group of people. And those two paths, both fine, but both very, very different.
Yeah. I've got a combination of both. So just because I like to be extra special, but
But I think that's important, Paula, because I think that there are, the 10 ways to do this, or the, this is a path, and how many, bestsellers have been written on that premise. But they don't actually offer the different ways. I think if you've got, a number of ways within your program, then I think that's fabulous.
And I think it goes then, once you get clear about it, you've got the ROI on those different product streams. So if I take CFO Conversations as a product stream, it's not going to make me financially wealthy, because there's no revenue attached to it, but it is community building, and other revenues come off the back of that community building.
And also
So
brand building.
yeah, so it's a silent ROI or it's a delayed ROI, but it's definitely not low hanging fruit, cash in the door in the next 12 months.
No.
But
And
that's
that's the thing,
okay.
that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you know where you're expecting your ROI, silent or otherwise, then you at least you've got something to measure it from,
Yeah.
and you can work towards your outcome. I
Yeah.
think that's, yeah, absolutely.
So this is a bit small, so apologies. There's a lot on here, which is why I want to make this into a business school. But this is my start at what the major moments are in business, and I've tried to encapsulate them in time periods. So we talked about building business, we talked about creating business, we talked about consolidating business, and then we talk about growth and maturity of business. So if we think about these four times here, these four checklists, it kind of goes across a 5-year period. So I'm thinking around, building the engine, the first 12 months of business. What are some of the attributes? What does that look like? Because some people might be at building, even though they've been in business for 2 or 3 years. They need to come back and do that work that we talked about. So, some of the big things on here, like we talked about, some of the structure, some of the birthing of the business with a logo and a designer to help create templates and cards, and building assets. I call those your assets, building up your IP, your stack of IP. What do you do? Like, you need that day one effectively, or certainly in the first 12 months, because you can't run an effective business just on the back of a couple of pieces of logos in a Word document. It just, it's just going to kill you. Buying the equipment that you need for your business, setting up structures that you need for your business, getting Xero or bank accounts. Like getting a business bank account might sound really basic, but there's certainly people that I've come across that don't separate their business from their personal bank accounts. It just makes life so much easier. But, thinking then around actually just being in your business. So working out, what is the problem that you're solving? Where are your clients hanging around? What are they saying? Do you know even what the business problem that you're solving is? So I think if you've not done this pre-thinking before you started, then this definitely happens in the first 12 months. You are doing everything yourself. You are a sole owner. Again, I can share this with the community, so I won't go through every single checklist, but I think that's some of the stuff that you need to do in the first 12 months. If you think then around, well, I've been in business now 12 months, I'm starting to know what I'm doing. I need to actually just come back and review where I'm at. So, whether I've got that consolidation of consistent thinking and creating, some followers. Have I even got a CRM? Have I got any knowledge of who's following me and why they're following me, and are they buying from me? And if they're not buying from me, where are they in that program, in that nurturing sequence? So this is probably where you're building up some of your more tech platforms around the CRM or project and time management, scheduling, how you spend your time, and just get a few more smarts on board. I think getting some confidence around owning your pricing and owning the sales conversation. Starting to realize that, the price is the price, and it's that because it's actually reflecting the 10 years that it's taken you to get there, not, the hour of time when people say, oh, but it's only this. So you do start owning your business, I think, and this is probably where I am. I'm in between 2 and 3, I think, at the moment in my PK business. I'm starting to get some momentum, and I'm starting to drive my car, and I kind of know where the good bits are, and, where some of the stuff that might need a bit of a review or an adjustment. And I think the financial planning. So I've now got literally FY21 starts tomorrow, and I've got my budgets loaded into Xero, which might sound ironic, but I never had a budget loaded in Xero for my first year. I'm just making this happen. I don't need a budget. I kind of know that I'm just going to be spending. So having a budget, getting the clarity around your assets, your IP, what you're prepared to give away if you're a service-based business, or, what are you prepared to have as a lead magnet, and then finding support networks. So again, as we spoke about with LBD, but thinking about your professional bodies, local government support, business chambers, business grants, third-party suppliers. And this came up when a conversation with Kate, I think, a couple of weeks ago, around frenemies. So I think, you know, we're starting to lose the competition. It's more a collaboration, you know, and working out where your complementary channels are, where your allies are versus where your competition is. So that's starting, you know, you're starting to get a bit more strategic thinking, I think, in your first, in that second zone, that sort of 12 to 24 months. Then I think around maintaining the engine, it's really now starting to build for growth. So starting to think about leveraging your time and getting the best return on your time, but planning then your key role. Because I think once you get to a certain stage in your business, you're going to start looking at the constraints that you've got, and some of the constraints will obviously be your time. So, and I've said this lots of times, work out what it is that you want to be for your business. If you want to be the person in charge of operations, or you want to be the person in charge of that whole business, or you don't really want a day-to-day involvement, but you want sort of a chairman role, you need to get clear about what role you want to play in your business, and then you need to recruit the people that you don't want to be, because otherwise you're never going to take it into that growth phase. Because you can't be at that stage, you know, you might be, I don't know, $500,000 revenue, you know, that kind of figure, up to $1 million maybe. You can't be doing it all yourself at that stage. So you've got to work out what you want to do. You know, then you're starting to think about job descriptions. You're starting to think about tech and standardizing procedures, onboarding processes, and then you start recruiting. Guess what? You're going to start having to manage people. You're going to have, you know, job descriptions. You're going to have policies around, you know, taking care of people. When it's been your own, that's easy because you're just working it out for yourself. But now you've got the responsibility of others. And then coming back and looking at measures that matter again, always looking at that review of your dashboard. And then the last point I think here is around, you know, automating some of your business. So this is where I think it's almost like the driverless car. So creating business that doesn't need your involvement, and that obviously then is revenue that can come through without you having to be always on the tools, so to speak. So yeah, that's really important. But you might always be thinking now about, you know, buying or acquiring other businesses or other products, or divesting of certain products, or stopping them altogether because they didn't work. You know, this is where you're starting to get into that really strategic next steps kind of growth. Thinking about support functions. So this is where, you know, I would say you probably need someone in finance, whether you need a part-time CFO or someone that's keeping you accountable to actually the performance of the business. And then obviously having sales and marketing and HR and things like that. And I'd say here, this is where you're sort of getting up to the $1 million plus mark of revenue and making, you know, profits in the sort of area of 100,000 plus. So there's a lot here, sorry, but I am going to unpack that a bit more in my business school. But I think this just tries to get a checklist on a page. Alice, is there anything I missed here?
No, I think it's awesome. I'm nodding, and my head's going to fall off. I'm nodding. I think that's great. I think about your last point there, and it's almost, you've got the car sorted now. It's about turning it into a time machine. You know, you sort of got that there. I really think that's phenomenal. No, I like it, Jeanette. No, just Jeanette. I like it, Paula. You've done very well.
Okay, so trying to summarize that into these phases. I really like the saying of the cost of business is going down, but the cost of waiting is going up. And I think that's never more true now. But if you think about those cycles, you know, it is around creating and building the engine, and then actually taking the engine for a drive. So, you know, once you've got momentum, you've got traction, it's actually, how do I review and finesse back my business models and my estimates? And do I have to finesse these assets? So, you know, like the social assets, the brands, you know, do I need to go back and revisit those? And then consolidating around, you know, looking at sales and conversions and building teams and expertise and having those processes and support structures. And then sort of the pinnacle, if you like, is around the automation, around the self-driving car. How much of it is actually then that, you know, that business that, you know, you can sort of step back away from if that's your end goal.
That's really important as well. I think I often use the analogy, I don't actually know where I got it from, but it's about, you know, do you want to be the hub? Do you want to be the spoke? Or do you want to be the umbrella? Do you know what I mean? Does all of the business have to rely on you Are you sort of, a supportive but relevant part of your business, or do you just sit at the top and add value and everything else can actually work around you? And I think, that's a really important analogy to look at. But at the same time, once you get to that, I still don't think that's the end, is it, Paula? Like, you're talking about, well, how do you sort of massage your business into the next phase and the next thing of what you want it to be? I think proactivity is absolutely key. Things don't just stay still. And if you're not looking at it, then there's a real opportunity that you might get left behind.
Yeah, and I think that's a nice segue into these transition points where, we do need that regular review. We do need that every 6 months as a minimum. I do it every 90 days, but, looking at what needs tweaking versus what needs a refresh, but looking where things are in the cycle of the journey inside the product. So what I will do with the workshop when we get to that is actually identifying where your products are in that life cycle and what you need to do to help each one of those products, because each product needs a little strategy on its own. So we've got the big strategy overall, but then each one of those products needs a business case, focus areas and tasks and timeframes. So I know that can sound a little overwhelming, but it's our business. We are passionate about it, and so actually it doesn't even feel like work, I don't think. But having that knowledge is power. So whilst we're busy doing the do and we're doing the delivery and we're building and maintaining, but we've got to keep time aside for checking back in because we need to know how we're going and we need to have that accountability. Otherwise, we're too busy in that do. So again, I think it's really around how much of this have you done before you start. So the pre-checklist. But, I think there's probably 3 transition points. And so I've called them a pre-launch transition point around setting expectations for yourself, knowing what the rewards will be in the first 12 months, getting clarity around that, because you won't have potentially the rewards that you would expect to see. So like revenue, profit, cash. What are you going to do to say to yourself, this is successful, when you don't have the sort of the standard rewards that we're used to? And having that pre-thinking. So I think that's transition number 1. I think the second transition is getting clear around who you are, what is your brand, what do you stand for, how are people seeing you, how are you showing up? Because then once you step onto the treadmill, it might be running at 15 k's an hour and you're going to have to just keep up, because there's no point coming out into the market with this is who I am and then disappearing. So when you make a decision to step onto the treadmill, you've got to be ready to know that you're ready to go. And again, you don't have to have it perfect, but you have to keep showing up consistently. So then you're starting to think about leads and building up your funnel, and also starting to think about what does resource look like, because as you go into that growth phase, you've got to have resources, which might generally be people, and to know that you've got enough cash to be able to pay their salaries before you've utilized their time. So as you're building a business, there's obviously a cost of that. And then your third transition is really investing into that further growth. So, people like HR, legal advice, finance advice, all of that is a overhead to your business. So making sure that you're ready to take that transition when you're ready to do that. So those are my sort of capacity constraints, investment, just starting to think forward before the next service level comes.
I think that's really important, Paula. I think business, like most things in life, is ever changing. Things just change all the time. My dad, bless him, used to always say, one day rooster, next day feather duster. And I've loved that. And in my industry, that's really relevant a lot of the time. But if you think about some of the biggest businesses that there were, you think about Kodak, for example, Polaroid back in the day, they weren't attentive, they weren't agile, they weren't aware, and their businesses went up in smoke. So it doesn't really matter where you are today. I mean, you've built a lot to be there, and that's really important. But what really matters is where are you tomorrow, and what can you do to make sure that you have a sustainable business and that you can thrive and survive through that. And if you're not looking at checking in and I think 6 months is a good time, you know, I think if you're not checking in and looking at how you're measuring against your benchmarks, which may not be the same as everybody else's, as long as you know where you're sitting and then what the plan could be, I think that's a really dangerous position to be in.
Yeah, and we spoke about this in one of the sessions midway point through this, and I liked your analogy around the garden. Like, think about those products and they're all in the different phases of growth, and you always need to be spending time on, you know, creating and spending time on the nurturing of the seedlings, and then spending time pruning back some of the, you know, more woodier aspects in the garden, and then knowing that you've got this other great idea that you don't have time for, but so that's just in the greenhouse waiting.
That's it. You know, you can't plant all your seedlings at the same time. They won't grow if the season's not right.
Well, that's right. And you can't eat them all either at the same time.
That's exactly it. So you've got to know, you know, what to put out there, what to keep back, you know, what you need to fertilize, what you need to dig up. I love that analogy. It's something that I live by all the time.
Yeah. Okay, and then to finish up, so this is really around starting to think about, where are my gaps, where's my business, where are my products, what do I need to do in the next 3 months, what do I need to do in the next 6 months and the next 12 months. And I find this really powerful when I can just actually consolidate my thinking into these time frames, because I can't worry about everything at the same time. So if I just park it over here, I'm going to look at that in 12 months, then I've given myself permission to not worry about that. What I need to do is this next piece of work here for 3 months, and then that will allow me to free up the next piece in 6 months. So something for me, I've got an online mentoring course that I'm still building. I've got the first 2 quarters up and live and people are on it. I'm building the next quarter, and then in December I want to have finished building the 4th quarter. And then in 6 months' time, I'm going to start recruiting mentors in my program, because I know that if I want 100 people on my program, I can't mentor everybody. There's just not enough time in my day. So I'm going to have to recruit a couple of mentors into my program to deliver that for me. So what does that look like? So I'm going to do that thinking in probably 4 to 5 months, but it's on my 6-month plan. And I'm not going to worry about it today.
I think that's really important. I think it's interesting, again, that probably feeds into what we were talking about with the garden and a few other things there, Paula. I've often thought that looking at taking that time to take that high level review, and you've mentioned that a few times today, and I think that's really important. One of the things that I sort of think about too with those periodic reviews is looking at your SWOT analysis, you know, and that is necessarily not just about you. Like, I think sometimes we like to think it's all about us, but it's not. The SWOT analysis is as much about our competitors as it is about us. And I think that even though we might not have changed, and we might think, oh, I don't need to do that because I did one last year and nothing much has changed in my business. But what's the guy next door doing? Yeah, and how's his business changed? And has he taken some of your customers? And how does that look? And I think that's really important to put our mind to, you know, with those reviews. And I'm a really big one for, especially at the moment, the pestle analysis as well. So it's taking a good look at sort of where do we stand politically, economically, you know, with our technology, our legal position, what's our environmental position, and how are those things going to impact on us? You know, and nobody could ever have predicted COVID and how that was going to work. But one of my big key points right at the start was everybody sit down, do your SWOT and do your pestle. Because now you need to figure out how does that impact on you, and then once you've got that analysis, how can you use that to sort of strategize into the next phase? Yeah,
and I think it's not something that I've referred to in this presentation, but around that risk management, there's a lot of small business owners that have still got $5 million businesses who don't have a risk register. They might instinctively know what their risks are, but they haven't written them down, and they haven't got a plan. They don't have any mitigation strategies. They don't have any controls necessarily to sort of be a red flag to say, hey, come and have a look over here, because this is kind of starting to fall off a cliff, or like you say, competition's doing X, Y, Z. I need to have a look at that. Not to say that, you know, I'm going to be impacted, but we can't just go on our merry way thinking that our business is going to survive in the way that it did. You know, it's just, that's just not reality. Doesn't matter how young or old your business is.
Oh, look, absolutely. I think with sort of those risk registers, I think they're very important. Similarly with the sort of the business continuity plans. And I heard an insurer say sort of midway, well, probably not midway through all this, because we're probably not midway through all this, but probably a couple of months ago now, around how even the businesses that had those plans, it was, if we can't come back into our office, we will go to here. And it's like, but no one actually considered that nobody could work, you know, together in one place.
Yeah.
I think what helps when you have the risk registers and the continuity plans, and even if they're not going to be used, if you have thought through a process, it's a lot easier for you to then branch off that process if you need to in times of crisis or in times of change. If you haven't even thought through that process, then that's a whole journey you have to go on before you can get your head around the fact that something else has now happened. Yeah. And I think that's really important to be able to sort of move into your business.
Yeah, and planning for these circumstances, especially challenging circumstances when you're not coming from a place of emotion, is important. So there's no point doing, well, I mean, some people have had to dust off their business continuity plans and see whether they work. But it's a different case with actually having to write it as you go. Certainly if you've got, you know, employing staff and you've got a business premise, then, you know, you really need to have that business continuity. I mean, when you're on your own, probably in the first 12 months, you know, I think it's probably, the challenges are the same, but, you know, you're just working out what impact it's going to be for you and your business and your home office and whatever else the risks are. But, you know, it's worth considering, because you think, well, if I give this a red hot go and it doesn't give me back what I need in my runway, in my roadmap, then what are my alternatives?
I think also it sort of, whilst you might have sometimes a smaller business, there can be significant events to that business that we maybe hadn't thought through. So something as simple as backing up a hard drive, which is something that sort of, you know, happens in big business mostly just without even thinking about it. But if you lose a day's work, if it's just you working, you know, that could be devastating.
Yeah.
But as much as just sort of going through that, what could go wrong, sometimes can just help us to turn to that. I totally agree.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And I've been thinking about that with my laptop, because when my laptop died about 6 months ago, like I just didn't have an alternative. I didn't have a second. So it's like, what can I do? I can't do anything. So just some simple things, you know, it's really important to think about all these aspects. Okay, cool. So I think for the ladies that are listening in Brisbane, I am doing a strategy day early August, where we can actually do some work around what does this roadmap look like. I've got a template that I use for financials, and then on the front of that in Excel is what are the tasks from a non-financial perspective. So we can absolutely share that, and I'm happy to do that ahead of time so that people can start their thinking. But, you know, I'd really appreciate comments back from those that are listening live and those that will listen later. Please let me know what I can expand on, because I want to turn this into a business school, because, you know, as you can see, it's a cycle. So we always need to be thinking and looking. And I guess this is some of the work that we would do in the immersion, you know, under sort of old LBD, if you like. But, you know, I think trying to create a different approach around a business school is what I'm exploring at the moment. So I'd appreciate any feedback. Thank you, Alice, for your insights as well. I think it's always nice actually to have a couple of people doing it, because it can feel quite lonely when you're just presenting on your own. And it's been good to get your feedback and insights along the way as well.
Thank you, Paula. No, it's been really great. Thank you for sort of I've enjoyed being involved. It's sort of it's a very important area in business. It's something I feel very passionate about as well. So thank you very much for both bringing it to, you know, attention of people who need it, and also I'm all for your international business school, but also letting me be involved. I think it's been great.
You're very welcome. I'm just going to stop recording and